Hi, Assalamualaikum. I'm Nur Shamimi binti Abdul Majid, and today I'm going to present the case analysis for a criminal procedure code subject. The case is public prosecutor against Muhammad Razi Abu Bakar, a landmark decision by the Federal Court of Malaysia. My presentation will cover four major components: statement of fact, issue for determination, a legal arguments and submission, including the relevant provision and of the CPC, and conclusion and the prayer for relief. So let's begin with the statement of fact. On 20th December 1991, custom officers at Padang Besar were conducting a surveillance. They noticed a suspicious motorcycle parked outside a shop. Later, two individuals approached and rode the motorcycle. Officers moved in an attempt to stop them. The rider, Muhammad Razi, and his pillion rider, Saiful, attempt to flee. However, both were apprehended after a brief chase. A search of Razi revealed 4 wrapped packets which were later confirmed to contain 342.1 grams of cannabis. Razi was charged under Section 39B, Clause 1, Clause A of the Dangerous Drug Act 1952, which provides for the mandatory death penalty for drug trafficking. He was convicted by the High Court, which invoked the presumption of possession under Section 37 Clause D, and subsequently the presumption of trafficking under Section 37 Clause DA, Dangerous Drug Act. However, the Court of Appeal overturned the conviction for trafficking, stating that the trial judge had erred in a law, and instead convicted Razi for possession under Section 39A Clause 2, which carries a lesser sentence. Razi was sentenced to 18 years imprisonment and 10 strokes of the can. The prosecution appealed to the Federal Court, which ultimately upheld the Court of Appeal's decision. Moving forward to issue for determination. There were 3 primary legal issues for the Federal Court to consider: whether the High Court had misapplied the law by relying on the presumption of trafficking under Section 37 Clause DA based on a presumed possession under Section 37 Clause D. In other words, whether it committed the error of double presumption, and then whether the Court of Appeal was right in substituting the trafficking charge with a conviction for possession under Section 39A Clause 2, whether the Federal Court should reinstate the original conviction, or whether the Court of Appeal decision was legally sound and justifiable based on the Criminal Procedure Code and principle of criminal justice. Next will be the argument and submission, legal principles and application. Let's now examine the legal principle and how they were applied in the case. Double Presumption and Dangerous Drugs Act. The trial court approach was to presume that the Razi possessed the drugs under Section 37 Clause D, and then presume that he was trafficking under Section 37 Clause DA. This is called a double presumption. It was later disapproved by the Federal Court in Muhammad Hassan's against Public Prosecutor 1998, that the precedent established a crucial rule. You cannot use one presumption to trigger another. So if the prosecution wants to rely on the presumption of trafficking under Section 37 Clause DA, they must prove actual possession with knowledge and control, not merely rely on presumed possession, which means if you already have a alleged, and then the role of trial judge at a close prosecution case under the Criminal Procedure Code, which is CPC, specifically section 173 clause F for sessions court cases and section 180 for high court trials. The court must perform a maximum evaluation of the evidence at the close of the prosecution's case. The standard is, has the prosecution made out a prima facie case? The court must assess the credibility of prosecution witness, the consistency of the evidence, and whether the fact logically support the charges. The federal court in Razi cases reaffirmed that even after the CPC amendments, the judge must still ensure that the presumption are properly applied, are properly made, and that there is no misdirection or miscarriage of justice happen. The defense argument, Razi defense, was that he did not know the content of the bag. However, his explanation was weak. He could not identify who gave him the bag, and his attempt to flee from customs officers raised suspicious. And still, the court found that while this fact might show knowledge, they do not consequently prove trafficking, since the presumptions of trafficking requires actual possession proven, not a presume. The burden of a proof remain unmet. Function of the appeal court, another principle discussed, was whether the appeal court could make its own findings of fact. The federal court emphasized that it is not a role of appellate courts to make primary factual determinations. That is the exclusive duty of the trial court, which has the advantage to observing witness demeanor. This reinforced the idea that appellate review is limited to evaluating whether the law was properly applied and whether the inference drawn were legally permissible. Next, we will proceed to the conclusion and prayer for relief. In conclusion, the federal court upheld the decision of the Court of Appeal affirming the reduced charge under Section 39A Clause 2 for possession and setting aside the death sentence imposed by the High Court. The court held that the trial judge misapplied the law by relying on a double presumption. The appellate court correctly applied the Muhammad Hassan's principles, and the accused's guilt for trafficking was not proven beyond a reasonable doubt. Prayer for relief. If I were representing the respondent, my prayer would be for the court to dismiss the prosecution's appeal and uphold the Court of Appeal's decision. This based on the improper application of statutory presumptions, the lack of concrete evidence proving knowledge that the drug natures, and the safeguard in a place under the CPC that are meant to protect the accused from unjust interference in a capital cases. This case undercrosses the importance of procedural safeguards, especially when it comes to a person's life is at stake. It highlights how the Criminal Procedure Code, if correctly followed, and serve as a critical check against a miscarriage of the justice. Thank you for your time. I hope this case study has helped you understand how procedural rules and legal principles work together in Malaysia's criminal justice system, especially under the CPC in serious cases like a drug trafficking. And I'm sorry to Madam Amira as well for my video is not in a proper way. I'm really sorry because I have a lack of tools to make the video right now. I hope you can understand the situation, madam. Thank you.